Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys.
And I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything from the Pistons to the NBA draft and the Motor City Cruise.
All right, Blake. So I had a question for you about traveling, but first, before I get to that, are you getting premium again or what is it called? Blue or whatever for
Oh
Twitter?
my gosh, I need to. So little background behind that. I got it because I wanted to interview someone, and you can only DM people that don't follow you.
Cold DM, right?
Yeah. So I paid for a year and it ran out and I have to redo it. But yeah, that's why we haven't been on Twitter. If anyone has noticed, they StreamYard or probably Elon X changed
I think
it. So
Twitter did it.
you could only connect the streams with premium. So yeah, we need to get back on there.
Well, I mean, this is 100% pot calling kettle black because I'm not paying for Twitter Blue or whatever.
Yeah, I really don't want to, but
I only brought it up because we started up the stream here, so peek behind the curtain, and there's this big notification that pops up on our StreamYard site where it's like, hey, Twitter's not letting you stream. You need to pay for Blue or whatever. So I forgot about it, and then I got the pop-up. I was like, oh, I'll give you a hard time on the podcast. What I really wanted to ask you, Blake, was, you've got dogs, right?
I have one dog and two cats.
Okay, so when you just had the dog, did you bring the dog with when you were traveling to places and doing mini vacations, or generally no?
No, we don't travel with our dog. Honestly, I wish we did this time because we went to San Diego and I didn't realize how dog friendly of a town it was. There were people had dogs everywhere. There were some staying in our hotel. Our hotel even had a welcome sign for the dogs and listed every dog's name that was staying.
Horrible.
Yeah, and I think our dog, we got her during when the pandemic first happened, so she has some anxiety with us always being around and everything. So I wish we did take her because she ended up, I think, stressing herself out and getting a little sick while we were gone, which was stressful. But then traveling would have been stressful for her too. So yeah, I really wish we did take her though. Do you travel with your dogs?
We do. We do for almost everything. I prefer, if all else is equal, to just drive so that I can bring the pups along with. I just kind of like having them around, but two, I don't want to pay for boarding them for a week. If I'm taking a summer vacation or something, I don't want to do that. The reason I asked though, and it kind of ruined the question, was your response. But the reason I asked was how different is it traveling with a dog versus the baby? That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, the farthest I've went with our dog is a trip up north to northern Michigan. So not a crazy trip by any means, and that was pretty easy. But with our son was it was his first flight. He's just under a year old. It was a long flight, time zone change and everything. He was really good. We can't complain. The only thing with it and the difference I'd say is I didn't realize how much and I guess how much of a challenge it is, just the amount of stuff you have to bring, and it's almost like a little dance. You have to check this, but we need to bring this on, and who's going to carry this. But overall it went well. I can't complain.
Good to know. I just remember when we got two dogs, right? The older one we also got during the pandemic. The younger one we got a couple years after that. And I was just remembering back to with the first dog, because obviously we went a little more crazy with our first dog.
Yeah.
We would pack up travel crates. It was just so much crap. And I was sitting here thinking on your trip to San Diego, what you must have had to have brought for your first son, right? It had to have been even more insane and even more crazy. So I was just curious.
Oh yeah, he had his own suitcase. We had a pack and play thing for him to sleep in. And I mean, I just brought normally I don't bring a humongous suitcase, but I did this time just so we could put travel height chair and things like that in it and take up that space. So yeah, it's just, I'd say the biggest thing, and obviously like depending on the situation, like it could be a pain or it could go really well to travel. But the biggest difference for me was just the sheer amount of stuff you have to bring and like who's going to carry all this.
Who? It's going to be you, but
Yeah,
or
exactly.
like me. It's us. We're the carrier. Even growing up,
100%.
that's what it was for me because I've got 3 younger sisters. So I'd be the pack mule, as my parents lovingly called me. All right. I feel like we need to actually dive into some of the sad stuff now with Jaden Ivey. Although we should say good news there, right? So I was actually just complaining to my wife about this the other night. I don't understand why the NBA is insistent on publishing the reevaluation window. Like Jaden Ivey's not going to be back in 4 weeks. He's going to get reevaluated in 4 weeks. Regardless, the thought that he might be back by the end of the season, right? If he rehabs that up and everything goes well, maybe back in a couple months, 3 months, like that's awesome. So it's not, clearly it wasn't as bad of an injury as it could have been. It sounds like it was probably a clean break if they're thinking about that kind of quick timeline, but man, what a tough injury and tough time, right? For it to happen for JI.
Yeah, just horrible to see, first of all, like, and yeah, obviously happy it was a clean break like you mentioned, and it didn't seem like there was any ligament damage from the coverage that was published. I think when Shams posted a story about it, I think the wording that he used was like Jaden Ivey's expected to miss at least the majority of the remainder of the season, which is kind of like unclear, but I think you just have to operate under that assumption. Like he's probably going to miss it at least the great majority of the rest of the season, if not the full season. And depending on where things are at towards the end of the season, you might not even want him to come back. Just take your time because that's a pretty serious injury, immediate surgery and everything. And overall, it was just difficult to see, especially when he's having the year that he had and going into a summer when you're eligible for an extension too. So yeah, tough to see, but overall happy that the team rallied around him and it's not like career ending or anything like that, but just horrible to see. It sucks. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah, and look, I mean, this is obviously getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I think if it were me, right, and I were getting all the rehab done and everything, if I had the opportunity to come back, or if I was coaching Jaden Ivey and he had the opportunity to come back like really late in the year, maybe like only a month left or 2 weeks left, something like that, it might be good to give him like 15 minutes off the bench, right? Because at that point, when you miss that much time, a big part of getting back to yourself is getting the full speed action again. So if there's actually a way where, hey, the season's kind of up in the air, or maybe even at that point doesn't matter anymore, right? You're not too concerned about winning games. You've already started to, dial some guys back like Cade or Tobias Harris, things like that. Then like that's a great opportunity to get ahead of it for Jaden Ivey so that his first NBA minutes after all the injury and all the rehab aren't like game one next season. But yeah, shout out QT, says bones are good at healing 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's why it was so exciting that it wasn't ligament stuff. You're thinking it's a full recovery and you're not too worried long-term about his speed, his quickness, things like that, which is awesome. And then Chili Damon says he'll miss Hutch time. Was this the same injury?
I don't remember exactly the injury that Hutchinson had, but it's definitely eerily similar. And I know Keith Langlois, the Pistons.com writer, posted that once it was a broken fibula for Ivy, he mentioned that Alex Ovechkin had a similar injury and came back after like 4 to 6 weeks. And he did mention that it's Alex Ovechkin, who's a lot, just like a freak of nature. But
yeah,
it's
hockey.
Yeah,
it's also exactly. Lower standard to return than hockey, to put it nicely.
Exactly. So yeah, it's something that other athletes have went through before. And although it's definitely not good to see and just like horrible all around, like hopefully he can come back as soon as possible.
Shout out to Order of the Blazing Horses. What up, though? What up, though, man? Happy to see you guys joining. All right, so let's just jump right into it then, because the fallout from the Ivey injury. And I'll have to say the answer to this was actually I did have this, but this is YouTube user says who had Wendell Moore Jr. on their bingo card as a starter. I wasn't expecting it. I did consider it as an option when we were recording the Pistons Pulse, and I was kind of thinking to myself, as Bryce and Amari were having that conversation. But what do you think about how JB approached at least just this one game of missing Jaden Ivey?
I thought it was interesting. I mean, I think I'm gonna give myself a few more games before I come to conclusions on it by any means. I think it was before the game. The beat reporters were posting about how JB Bickerstaff mentioned you can't really just full on replace what Jaden Ivey brought, and in terms of the rotation, it's going to be a bit fluid and figure things out, which I agree with. I think it's a good approach, but I mean, even still with that, I didn't think the first option or the first look you'd go to would be starting Wendell Moore Jr. Even though he started, I mean, he didn't bring anything offensively. He had 15 minutes and just not much overall, which is fine. I mean, he's looked good at times and also just looked a bit invisible out there at times, which I think you can expect from a traditional like end of the rotation guy. I thought initially when Ivey was going to be missing extended time, I thought that would be what probably leapt Ausar Thompson into the starting lineup. I feel like Malik Beasley is the cleanest option to put in the starting lineup in place of Jaden Ivey. But if you put Beasley into the starting lineup, you're like, who's going to score off the bench? I feel like you don't have a reliable scorer, and Beasley has been incredible in that role the whole season. So it's just, you're gonna be missing something, and I'm not sure if like Ausar only played 14 minutes against the Hornets. I'm not sure if he's fully ready either. I think Ron Holland should eventually get some minutes, but yeah, I think Wendell Moore starting was kind of just let's keep everything else the same, except obviously like the starting lineup, which is a big piece. So it's a little weird, but I guess it makes sense. But I don't know if it's something I want to see just until Jaden Ivey is back, for example.
Well, and like YouTube user brings up in the comments, it's not like the second unit isn't already going to be different. Jaden Ivey was the second unit point guard, right? So honestly, my first thought when I saw the starting lineup posted was that this was a Simone Fontecchio problem. You're technically right now replacing two guys off the bench already with Tech out, and then like we just said with Ivey being the backup point guard, and he's obviously out. So the cleanest thing was, in this case, if you already have two bench minutes that you're kind of patching together with duct tape and glue, then to stick someone into the starting lineup that's usually out of the rotation, as that would have lesser of an impact, right, on the entire rotation on the whole when you're already having to do those replacements. I'm really curious to see what happens when Fontecchio is back. What they've been doing, what JB's been doing when everyone's been healthy, is basically three forwards off the bench, kind of splitting minutes with Fontecchio, Ausar, and Ron Holland. And whoever was playing better would usually get the nod, right, to get the majority of those minutes, though not all. Everyone would still get some tick. I wonder if now with Ivey out, if you might just shift one of those guys up, right? Tim Hardaway Jr., I think would be, I mean, he's been a struggle guarding some wings already, so it might be tough to ask him to guard a few more guards if you put Fontecchio up there. But, you know, if you move, say, like you said, Ausar Thompson into the starting lineup and shift Tim Hardaway Jr. down to the 2, then you still have two backup forwards that'll just eat up all of those minutes, and you can play a little bit less, you know, puzzling together with that. It just gets a little bit more simple. So Like, genuinely, I kind of think that Wendell Moore Jr. starting was just a product of also being out or being without Simone Fontecchio. I suspect we're going to see something different once he comes back from, YouTube user says personal reasons. Yeah, hopefully everything's all good in the Fontecchio household. Stuff like this is always tough because people jump to the negative side of things. He also could be having like a baby or something. Like, who knows? You never know what good or bad stuff's going on. So he's just away from the team for the moment. Assumedly, he'll be back soon.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think another element is Bobby Clintman is back from injury. He's playing in the G League. Who knows? Like, he's not a replacement for this role by any means, but I think he's another guy that could potentially start seeing some minutes at the end of the rotation once he's ready and available. He's still on assignment with the Crews, but I think he is a guy like I wasn't expecting Ron Holland to do what he's doing with the Pistons so far. And Clintman's a guy that fills sort of that forward spot. So maybe he's someone who steps in, adds some rotational minutes as well. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens when Fontecchio comes back. I mean, the Pistons are on a back-to-back. They play the Minnesota Timberwolves the night following the Charlotte game. So I honestly doubt Fontecchio will be back. I don't know that for sure, but hopefully he's back soon so we can see what everything looks like at full force. Somewhat full force.
Yeah, let's just stick with this for a second because we did, shockingly, I know we did get a couple questions on the fallout from the Jaden Ivey injury. So let's go to this one here from Rames, and I think we're going to kind of paraphrase this into just what would you do? How would you handle this? Like, what should the Pistons do without Jaden Ivey now? But Rames asks, how many more minutes do you think Marcus Sasser will get while Jaden Ivey is out? And should Ausar or Ron Holland absorb most of the minutes here that were going to Jaden Ivey? Jaden Ivey was averaging almost 30 minutes a night. I believe he was second on the team in shot attempts. He was obviously first or second actually on the team in 3-point attempts and makes. So big shoes, right? No matter how you slice this is a really, really big offensive role. Not to mention that he really was the point of attack defender. There were some issues with that with guards that you and I have talked about before, but it's a big role. Point is, it's a huge role that the Pistons are losing right now. So what would you do to fill it?
Yeah, so with Sasser, on the season, he's averaging 13 and a half minutes a game and 23 games played. So that's like a decent number of DNPs as well, just when he was out of the rotation to start the year, and then he was filling in a bit. And then against the Hornets, so the first game after Ivy was fully out with injury, Sasser played almost 22 minutes a game. So I don't know if he's going to play that many minutes each night, but I think he'll definitely see maybe 4 or 5 more minutes per game on average, just because you're losing your primary creator in the second unit and you don't really have that guy to go to, like a third point guard. I think that might be a likely signing that we see depending on how Trajan Langdon uses the cap space and what trades are available to come in and bring in draft picks that we know he wants to do. If you do have some cap space left over, maybe that's a signing they make. Maybe it's a type of player that is out of some other team's rotation that Langdon asks to be included in that deal, because like Marcus Sasser isn't, like, it's not his true role. So I don't think the answer is just give him the keys and run with it. Give him almost 12 more minutes a night and run the second unit. I think in the meantime, maybe you can try to patch the hole with that, but I just don't think it's the long-term solution. So I feel like, especially if Ivy is going to miss the rest of the season, I think there has to be some sort of move that this team is going to make. And I'm just not sure what it is, but I think there will be something out there, because it's just clear to me that the answer isn't really on this roster right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, Marcus Sasser's best role to me is playing next to a big guard is kind of that, he's a feisty defender, so he could take point guards on the other end. And then on offense, playing off the ball, playing off movement, and kind of being a score first type of player. The problem is the Pistons are kind of painted into a corner here. So, it was floated a couple times on the Pistons Pulse, like, hey, maybe you should start Marcus Sasser because he's probably the cleanest fit, honestly, next to Cade Cunningham without disrupting the rotation too much. The issue, at least that I have with that, is you've got no one else that can really back up Cade. And look, as much as I do like Marcus Sasser and want to see him play more minutes, I don't want to see him playing 30 a night like Jaden Ivey was. It'd be tough to split him as a starter and the primary backup to Cade Cunningham. So if it were me, right, I'm with you. I think you kind of ask Sasser to sink or swim a little bit as the backup to Cade Cunningham. If Cade's averaging 36 minutes a night, then get Marcus Sasser 12. So when Cade's out, then Sasser's in, and that's kind of at least how I do it up until the trade deadline, where maybe, like you said, you can get someone that could kind of step in and temporarily fill the hole, maybe on an expiring contract or something like that. But it's just it's really a tough spot without having another point guard. This was kind of the nightmare scenario, actually, that we had talked about before the season started, right? When we were looking at the roster going, Jaden Ivey's the backup point guard. You've got Marcus Sasser behind him. Jaden Ivey's also the starter. They just kind of have a very shallow depth behind Cade. That's not a bad thing for a team that's rebuilding like the Pistons are. And I would absolutely not want a panic trade or anything like that to fill this role that you've lost with Jaden Ivey. I have much more appetite for asking Sasser to try and step up and see if he could be a backup point guard, for asking Ron Holland or Ausar Thompson to step into that starting lineup and maybe have a little bit more of a scoring load that they would have off the bench. I'm much more interested in those types of things rather than bringing in a guy to step in for Ivey. But it's just, they are in a tough spot. They really are.
Yeah, and I think the good thing is the trade deadline is only a month away, and I just think like that's a reasonable amount of time to at least try and get by, see if this works. And yeah, if there is a move made, which I think there will be, I don't think it'll be one that's like splashy by any means. Like, I think it'll be something like Malachi Flynn gets routed to Detroit at the trade deadline like he was last year, and he ends up playing some minutes towards the end of the season when you're trying to piece things together. So a player like that mold that can help you off the bench just get by and help bring that like a creator to the second unit, because I feel like we don't really have that right now. And it's just we knew the roster was sort of set up like this going into the regular season, and now just with the absence of Jaden Ivey, it's glorified a little bit. But yeah, overall, I think it's an opportunity for Marcus Sasser. I hope he does well. I just don't think it's the primary role for him, and really like, and I also think he knows what kind of player he is. And he'll be asked to do something else because of this injury. And I think he can perform well. I just think it's not the type of player he is long term. But it's a great opportunity for a second year guy.
The last thing that I want to say on Marcus Sasser is just that this is kind of a bummer for him in a way, isn't it? Like, I know he's going to get more minutes, and so in that way it's good, but he's going to get more minutes doing something that is not necessarily his strength. And it's always, at least to me, it's always kind of a bummer to see young guys who are trying to find their way in the league get asked to do something that's really not what they maybe should be doing, I guess. Like, you could think back to Isaiah Stewart early on in his career where he was the starter, or even last year where he's the four-man, right? And you're just looking at a guy who, yeah, he's got all this talent. He's a great defender. You've got all these pluses with the player in particular, but the role he's being asked to do in Detroit at that time was just it shouldn't have been what he was being asked to do, but they didn't have another choice. The roster was set up in a way that that's what he had to do. So it is. I do think it's just a little bit of a bummer that like we can't see Sasser, or we probably won't see too many minutes of Sasser now playing off of Jaden Ivey or off of Katie Cunningham or another guard like that who can set him up and make his life a little bit easier on offense. Regardless, though, I think you and I are on the same page that one, Marcus Sasser probably shouldn't be the starting guard next to Kate when Ivy's out. And then two, we'd probably like to see someone other than Wendell Moore Jr. So what would you do? What is the solution for Blake Silverman?
Oh man, like I feel like in an ideal world for me, it's to start Ausar, but like Ausar hasn't, I guess, grab this role and say like I need to be the one that's in the starting lineup right now. There's things that you can pick apart with him defensively this year, and also he still has the same problems on offense. He's not shooting the ball at all. His handle still doesn't look great, and then if you're asking him to play next to another non-shooter like Jalen Duren, like then you're back at the same problems right now. Team Savant brings up Ron Holland in the chat. Like I think that's a good option. I think Holland's shot has looked good first and foremost, and it started to drop a little bit more. I think it's still going to need some time, and I've been really impressed with what Ron Holland is able to do around the rim. And then defensively, he's an active defender. He can make plays at times. It's still a work in progress there as well. So like I feel like I would want Ausar to be in the starting lineup, especially with this injury to Jaden Ivey. But right now, I just think the context of this roster, it creates some other problems. So maybe Holland's the answer. Maybe Simone Fontecchio is when he's back. But yeah, right now, like I wish it was Ausar. It's just I don't know. Like I don't know what it would look like, and if you can do that for 5 to 10 games and into the future until you have a Jaden Ivey back available.
Yeah, I'm not hoping that it's Ausar Thompson at all. We have talked on this podcast plenty about the pairing of Duren and Ausar, and look, I'll just say that that's been an issue since Ausar has returned against the Magic in particular, and a few people have pointed this out too. This happened against the Hornets, but it was very, very obvious the spacing concerns that that pairing causes against the Orlando Magic. There were 3 plays. You could go back and find this. There were 3 plays in that game where Tobias Harris is posting up in the mid-range, probably about 15 feet on the strong side wing. Okay. Jalen Duren is on the weak side block, maybe a step or 2 off. His man is helping all the way over on the opposite side of the hoop to help with the not Isaiah Stewart, to help with the Tobias Harris post up, which in and of itself, probably not great position. I would be worrying about the lob, but maybe you're just thinking that Tobias Harris isn't going to throw it regardless. So you've got that problem right there. And actually on a couple of them, you could hear JB Bickerstaff on the mic yelling for Duren to back up and get out and get away. Problem was Ausar Thompson was also right behind Jalen Duren in the weak side corner. Take a wild guess where Ausar Thompson's man was.
Oh man, he just not anywhere close.
3 times, by the way. Yeah, 3 times. Doubling Tobias Harris.
Yeah.
Not even like covering, playing to no, straight up double on Tobias Harris from the opposite corner. You cannot function with that. And I know that they can kind of get away with it a little bit more. Defenders can get away with it a little bit more because Harris has been very late to pass out of double teams. When he's posting up, he's very much score first when he puts his back to the basket. I get that. But the spacing was just, it's so bad when those 2 are out there. It is so bad. And there's no real way around it. Like you could ask Ausar to be a better cutter. And I think that's valid. I think he struggled off ball with his cutting this year more so than he did last year. But it's also not like he's cutting into open space very often, right? Because Duren's guys in the paint too. There's really no winning. So unless you're going to use it as an excuse to put Isaiah Stewart in the starting lineup or Paul Reed in the starting lineup, which I guess is a conversation we could have, then I'm not in favor of Ausar Thompson starting. I do want to point out, though, we're talking this a little bit before the show, but Ausar Thompson, his stocks per 100 possessions have basically remained the same. Okay. But they're very different than they were last year. So last year, per 100 possessions, he averaged 2.1 steals and 1.8 blocks. This year, it's 3.1 steals, so one additional steal per 100 possessions, and 0.8 blocks. So exactly one less block per 100 possessions. He's been, like, I don't want to say that it's less disruptive because per stocks numbers, it's clearly not. But it's very different than last year. And I'm not quite sure why.
I mean, I've wondered the same thing. Do you think he's just not all the way at 100% and like ready to come back? Because I mean, he didn't play a ton of minutes. He played 14 minutes against the Hornets on the season. So far, he's playing just under 18 minutes a game. So there might be a little bit more ramping up, and he might just need some more time. And yeah, YouTube user brings up JB's using him in a different role. That very well might be it as well. So yeah, it's odd, I think. But I don't know. I'm willing to give it a little bit more time just because he's played just under 15 games so far this season. So we'll see what comes from it.
Really quickly, shout out to Mateus, our guy from Brazil. Thanks for joining, man. Always appreciate it. Going back to Ausar Thompson, like, you're probably right. It does feel a little bit like he's on a bit of a pitch count with his minutes right now. And I have no idea how you'd want to ramp a guy back up to a full minute load after, the blood clotting issue that he had. So absolutely could be just like a feel thing, right? But as a tangent here with JB, with YouTube users saying that JB's using Ausar Thompson in a different role, offensively, I actually really like it. I love how the Pistons have been using Ausar Thompson. It's much more off ball. They're actually using him as a screener or as a guy handing the ball off in DHOs now. He's not just standing in the corner. Usually there are times that he is, but a little bit different than last year. I feel like last year there were moments where the play was designed to stick Ausar in the corner and just kind of be away from things. This year, more often, I'm getting the sense that if Ausar is standing in the corner, then he should be reading the defense and maybe making a cut, right, or trying to get himself open. It's not the actual play to stick him over there, if that little difference makes sense. But what have you thought about Ausar Thompson's usage here in these 15 games since he's been back?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, my issue is like I was mentioning with the starting lineup. I just want him to just beg JB to be like, you need to play me more minutes. But I think the holes in his game have still stuck out. They're still glaring. And I don't think the shot is going to magically improve out of nowhere. I mean, I think the handle has more upside to improve and at least become something someday, even though it hasn't looked good so far this year. But I just think overall he's one of the best athletes that on the team and debatably in the league. Like, he just brings an element that isn't easy to come by, and we know what kind of defender he can be, and he's been disruptive. He's looked good at times, and there's other times where you can pick things apart as well. So I think right now it might just be adjusting to a new system, adjusting to coming back to full force after missing all the time he did. So I don't know. I guess I think it's just been a little like straight line down the road, and I'm waiting to see him ramp up a little bit more. But I think I'm not starting to worry that he can't improve the fields that we know he needs to improve on. I just think if it's this way, like next year, it might just be like, this is the player he is. And I just worry about the team always having to mold lineups around him to make up for those like doubles that you mentioned and leaving Ausar alone. So I think that's the problem with him overall. But I think he's been good. It's just not like he hasn't leapt off the page, I guess, and demanded that he be put into the starting lineup after 15 games, I guess is my point.
Let me ask you this, Blake, because and I want to preface this by saying that I am of the belief if I had my way right now, Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson, one of those two would be on the floor for the entire 48 minutes of the game. I think both of their potential is through the roof. I love what they're bringing on defense, even though we have nitpicked Ausar Thompson just a little bit so far on this show. But overall, his impact on defense has been great. His athleticism is a huge plus, good in transition, all that stuff. And you could say a lot of that same thing about Ron Holland as well. So I want to get that out there before I ask you this question. Where is this idea that Ausar Thompson needs to be an on-ball player coming from? Because I've seen that talked about. I've seen he needs to improve his handle because that's his upside is like Paul George or something like that. And I don't, not only do I not get it, I don't see it. I didn't see it in OTE. I don't see it now. He's very stiff with the ball in his hands. It's not just his handle, and his handle is loose and he needs to tighten that up, but he's also stiff in his movements. He doesn't get around guys easier. He doesn't flip his hips easily at all. When he's attacking forward, he's much better, much quicker, and much more fluid on defense when he's backpedaling or trying to stay in front of guys. We've talked about the shooting. Mateus brings up that he's 48% from the free throw line this year. And look, guys that shoot less than 20% from three usually don't become good shooters. We could just put that out there now. So, let's not bank on Ausar Thompson being a really great 3-point shooter at some point in the future. His passing has always been significantly better from a standstill or off one or two dribbles or in transition. So point is, where is this? Oh, he's going to be some on-ball creator and needs secondary playmaking reps. Where is that coming from? Where?
I think there are two things, and I think first is probably who his brother is, but it's easy to.
No, that's a great point.
It's easy to assume that they should both be the same player, but they're just not. They never really have been. Ausar was always more of a play finisher, and that's why he scored a bunch at OTE and won MVPs, and his brother was passing him the ball and excelling in that. And I think second, it's also a little bit because of the team context that Ausar is playing in now with the Pistons, where you don't have a bunch of those secondary, tertiary creators. I think it would just be nice if that could be Ausar because of his frame, who his brother is, and we know his twin brother has that same skill. But I think you're right. You have a point, and maybe that's just not the type of player he is. And we know he's excelled at being that play finisher who can go out and defend, and that might just be what he is. But if that's the case, the Pistons need to bring in some other guys that can dribble the ball and make plays. And I mean, I think Ausar is a good playmaker, even though the handle isn't there. It's just how can he be in those opportunities? And I think the Pistons need a couple other ball handlers, playmakers to help open that up a little bit for Ausar.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think hopefully one of those guys can be Ron Holland here in the future. I've really liked what he's flashed with the ball in his hands more than I ever expected that I would. And actually, to go all the way back to Rames's question, I think my solution to this how to replace Jaden Ivey thing would probably be Ron Holland. I know it's putting a lot on his plate, but he's better offensively than Ausar Thompson, significantly so, shockingly enough, this early in his career. And he's also better defensively than a guy like Fontecchio or Marcus Sasser, even though he's worse offensively than both of those guys. So he seems kind of like the happy middle ground where you can get some of the ball handling reps and you can run some of those pick and roll actions or dribble handoffs for Ron Holland, which are things that I'd just like to see him do anyway at this point, just to get those reps in early. But regardless, back to Ausar, like I really like Ausar Thompson. My pitch for Ausar Thompson is to be, I can't really think of a player comp for it. Maybe like go all the way back to Andre Karolinko or something like that, where almost everything is straight. Like if he's driving to the hoop, it's right off a rip and go, right? He's not probing around or doing anything like that. It's pretty much a straight line drive. Great connective passer, killer in transition, great screen setter, right? Good as in the short roll where his passing can really shine. And then just a smart cutter. Like that's a really, really good player, especially when you add in all the stuff that he does defensively. That I think he's like, that's the guy that I want starting at the 4 next year. Actually, he's just not, I don't know. Like I don't see all of what we've seen from Ausar Thompson and go, wow, like Andre Iguodala is the, like Mateus brings up, is the comparison. Maybe late career Iggy, right, where he was doing less on ball, but early, no. Like I do not want the ball in Ausar Thompson's hands to initiate. I'd like to get the ball into Ausar Thompson's hands when he's moving and then can get it to someone else because I trust him in that secondary pass situation. But yeah, I guess that's my pitch on Ausar Thompson. I think he and Ron Holland are going to be a great pair starting, hopefully, fingers crossed, next year at the 3 and 4. But like very, very different roles to me. I'd want Holland far more off ball. And of course, as YouTube user brings up, I would want to stretch big.
Yeah, it that begs other questions on the roster, which are a different conversation. But with Ausar, is he who you brought up Gerald Wallace for before?
Yeah. Yep. I stand by that.
Yeah. No,
actually, I don't know why I didn't think of that.
No, that's a good one. I was like, I think it's Ausar, but it could be someone else. But yeah, that's a good one as well. And yeah, with I mean, he's still a great defender. I just think so far through this year, there's definitely more things that you can pick apart, which I'm definitely optimistic those will be singing a different tune about that in a month from now or however much time. So yeah, definitely interesting season for Ausar so far, and I think the absence of Ivy will it'll make things a little more interesting too.
And like last thing I'll say is I know the NBA's changed, it is changing, and it's kind of shifting away from guys that can't create for themselves, but I still think there is a role for a straight line driver who is a very good quick decision passer, has pretty good feel, right, for what's happening in front of him, and is a great defender, and is a very good rebounder for his position. Like I know those guys aren't superstars, and I don't think Ausar will ever be an all-star type player, score 20 points or maybe even 15 points a game, right? But there's a role for a guy that you can get creative with and put into spots where, you know, he can get other guys going, or he can just kind of cause some chaos offensively. So I'm very much in on Ausar Thompson, even though I'm not on that type of bandwagon for him. QTS, can Ausar be our long-term power forward? I hope so. Want to give out a shout out to Arthur Sace. Hopefully I said that right. Because he brought up the fact that the Hornets were ignoring him if he was further than 10 feet. Ausar, that is, we're annoying Ausar if he was further than 10 feet away from the basket that we brought up earlier. We just didn't shout him out. Last thing on this, and then we'll get to whatever questions we can. This from the live chat. YouTube user asked, did Ron and Ausar Thompson try to do just a little bit too much with the ball in their hands last night, perhaps to try and make up for the loss of Jaden Ivey?
Maybe. I actually, and yeah, I think game one probably there's a little bit of an element of that. But I think maybe we'll see that dip a little bit as the team gets used and the chemistry without Ivy being a part of the team on the court. I think they'll get used to that a bit. And I think I enjoyed a bit what Ron did in his limited minutes. I mean, he played just under 11 minutes, so not a ton, but I thought he looked good. He had some crafty finishes near the rim as well, and I would be all for him getting more minutes as we figure things out without Jaden Ivey in the mix. I was a little confused, honestly. I know he got into a bit of foul trouble, but why Ron Holland didn't immediately get more minutes without Ivy available. So yeah, I mean, I think there might be a little bit of an element of trying to make up for what Ivy gives you, but I think overall, like, there isn't a singular player or even a mix of players that are just going to automatically give you what Jaden Ivey gives you. And I think the guys that are given an increased role without Jaden Ivey just need to understand, like, that you got to play your game and not try to make up for someone else's. So yeah, I think there's probably a bit of that to start, but I'm pretty confident it'll drop a bit as more and more games are played without Ivy.
Agreed. I mean, I think you're right. Both of those guys were probably trying to do just a little bit more than usual. I don't know. Maybe not Holland, like you said. So Holland didn't play a ton of minutes. It was just 11, right? He was really good in the first half, not as much in the second. I kind of think that maybe, and we might just see this a lot more now moving forwards, but without Jaden Ivey and the rim pressure that he gets, Ron Holland's roller coaster is going to be a little bit more noticeable. Ron Holland is probably right now the most natural get to the rim on your own athlete on the team. Cade is going to get a lot more paint touches, but most of his paint touches are coming from set screens or some of those post ups that he gets. He's good ISO getting to the hoop, but he's not a natural with it, just given his okay NBA athleticism. Ron Holland is both a fluid handler of the ball, even though it's a little bit loose. He's also a good mover and he can get to the rim. So the importance of Ron Holland driving to the hoop is suddenly magnified without Jaden Ivey doing it as well. So I don't think that Ron Holland did much differently than he had been doing the past couple of weeks against the Hornets. Maybe just more, right? He had more opportunities to do it now that Ivy wasn't there. But it wasn't like he was trying to expand his game. It's just the fact that the turnovers and the missed layups that kind of like turn into air balls, right? He's been doing that. It's just now it really stands out. It really stands out.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I hope Holland plays a little bit more. I mean, I was a little bit confused by it, but like you mentioned, it was maybe just not much going on in the second half. And he also didn't get into the game until really late, I think. I think he came in with like maybe 1 minute left in the first quarter, or maybe even, I don't know. I'd have to go back and rewatch, but I think it might have just been a little bit of trying to adjust the rotations without Ivy and seeing what happens. So I think we'll see his minutes go up because, yeah, I wasn't expecting him to go down from, I think he's around 15 minutes a game on the season to playing a decent amount less than that. You don't have Jaden Ivey available. So I think we'll see that change and just need a few more games under our belt to see what that's like.
Yeah, completely agree. So fingers crossed. I mean, like I said, I'd start him at this point. So hopefully at a minimum, the minutes numbers are going to increase. This is a question here from Cliff Dweller, also kind of on the same topic as you might expect, given the big news, right? That just happened this past week. But is there an overpaid but still functional point guard or maybe combo guard out there who the Pistons could trade for and possibly get assets for taking on that could help them maintain a more functional rotation without Jaden Ivey? That was Cliff Dweller from the DBB comments.
Yeah, I know you put together some options for these. Did you wanna rattle those off?
Yeah, but I don't think they're going to make me popular. D'Angelo Russell, if the Brooklyn Nets just want to get off that contract, I don't think at this point you'd get an asset for taking him, maybe like a second, since he was already an asset dump one time this season, right? When that Dorian Finney-Smith trade with the Lakers, but that's an option. Cole Anthony is actually a guy I really like. He was kind of sort of out of the rotation when the Magic were all healthy, and he's now a lot more important given all the injuries that they've had. And, fingers crossed, hopefully Jalen Suggs is okay. That's a guy that I was really impressed with so far this year and had a really nice game against Detroit. But neither here nor there. So maybe Cole Anthony isn't an option. Maybe he is if the Magic continue to get more healthy. And then Davion Mitchell's kind of been yo-yoed in that rotation for the Toronto Raptors. He's a guy I like. I especially like him next to Cade. I know he's not exactly a point guard, but he's a very, very good point of attack defender, iffy 3-point shooter. So order the Blazing Horses. Imagine Cole Anthony after taking out Ivy and replacing Ivy. I feel bad for Cole Anthony, by the way. He was getting dogged just because it resulted in a bad injury, and he was making a great hustle play that we'd all be applauding if we were Magic fans, and it didn't end up the way it did. And he was clearly emotional too, watching the whole thing unfold. So feel bad for the guy, but regardless, yeah, that would be pretty funny. But Davion Mitchell's probably the guy I like most at this point. Like if you could get him for a couple of seconds, that might be something worth doing. But other than that, like I wasn't all that impressed with the options just kind of sitting around at the end of benches right now.
Yeah, the only other name I'll bring up, and I promise this isn't recency bias because I brought the name up, I think, a couple weeks ago, is Vasily Micic from Charlotte, and he played
He had
against
a nice game.
Yeah, he played against the Pistons a decent amount because LaMelo Ball was out. And I was wondering, like, would Charlotte want to give him up because LaMelo has so many injury problems? If LaMelo is healthy, like they were KJ Simpson, their rookie second round guard, they were giving him some minutes against the Pistons last night, and he looked pretty good. So I wonder if Micic would be a name that's a fairly low cost option. He makes under $8 million a year, has a team option for next year, and is just like a true creator. And I mean, Troy Weaver made the move for Fontecchio, so it's a different front office now, but he's like a second-year player, but an older guy. And it's sort of similar ilk and brings something that this team needs. So if he's available for a low cost, I like him as well. But yeah, I like Davion Mitchell as well, because I think he's something that he can at least defend as well and make some plays. And yeah, the D'Lo one is interesting, but I think I saw a report that like Brooklyn is going to keep him there, but I couldn't imagine them not being willing to trade him if there wasn't a good deal on the table.
D'Angelo Russell is one of those guys that seems to only be able to play in Brooklyn, so maybe they do just want to keep him around. I mean, with the Nets, he's a building block. Anywhere else, he's a salary cap dump. Let's get to this one here from ABW17. We're just kind of a general question, and there is a follow-up. But if you're running the Pistons right now, are you looking to capitalize on the winning momentum and buy at the deadline to push for the playoffs, or would you rather be renting out your cap space on shorter term contracts that get assets back in that trade?
I think I would prefer the latter. Just renting out cap space and still trying to be in asset accumulation mode, at least for a little bit longer. The winning that the recent stretch definitely makes that more of a question. Like I think it would be great for this young team to make a run at the play-in, compete for a playoff series, like however high they can get, especially with some of the stuff that's going on with other teams in the East, like Jimmy Butler wanting out of Miami, everything that's been going on in Philly, things like that. It makes it a little harder, but I just think where the roster stands right now, totally they're still like building towards being a contender in the East. And I think until you're at that point, it doesn't make sense to push the chips all in and sell like all your draft picks, things like that. So I mean, if there's a way to thread the needle where you can at least compete for the play in and still make moves that don't give up draft assets, and maybe you can find some flexibility in return, I think that's ideal. But right now I just lean towards just pumping the brakes a little bit. I think they're maybe a season away from being where you really should push the pedal down and make a move that puts your chips all in, and now throw the Ivy injury into the mix. And I think it's even more of a challenge. I just don't think this is the season to go for it, although they've won a lot more games at this point than I was expecting them to. But right now, I don't know. I feel like it'll cool off, and I don't want to say that, but right now I just think it's leaning that way. And I think from everything that Trajan Langdon has said publicly, he still wants to build the draft cupboard and go at it from that way and slow play this a bit, which I understand just as his first season with the team and where the roster stands itself too.
And that draft cupboard is pretty empty, which I think is the other side of this conversation, right? Because like, look, let's say you do, right? Let's say you are the Pistons and you want to go out and get a guy who's going to help you right now, and maybe like a star player, right? So maybe let's just say it's Brandon Ingram, Jimmy Butler, guys like that. You don't have the first round picks to trade. Okay, so that's just straight up. You cannot trade a first round pick until I believe 2029. I believe that's the first one because of the Stepien rule right now. So that's your first round pick that you can trade. Outside of that, and you look at this roster, what sort of buy now assets do they have? Because Jaden Ivey was one of them. He's not anymore, right? Not with this injury. They're not going to do that. No, probably most teams would rather not do that and bring in a guy who is hurt that significantly and all that. So that's one, right? Go down the list. You look at like Jalen Duren. We've discussed it's a big who can't shoot and is not a good defender. So how many teams really want that? You've got second round picks that you could bring in, but second round picks are starting to get, or that you could send out, and second round picks are becoming more valuable. So that's possible, but that's not going to get you a star player or a borderline all-star. So that's not really, in my opinion, that's not the type of buy now move most of this conversation seems to be set around. Ausar Thompson would definitely have a lot of value. Do you want to lose Ausar Thompson? Ron Holland would definitely have a lot of value. Do you want to lose Ron Holland right now when, again, you don't have like a surplus of picks coming down the pipeline? So I'm with you. Like, if it's me, I would like to slow play it. Let's get additional assets in here. Maybe we could grab a future first round pick for one of our veterans who's playing really well. Maybe we can do, get extra second round picks and bring in a guy who can fill a role a little bit right now, like a Davion Mitchell, right? Like maybe Toronto would give you Mitchell and a second for like Fontecchio or something like that. That sort of small deal that gets you a draft asset and does also help you a little bit in the moment, right? But not only do I agree that I don't think it makes a lot of sense to invest right now, they also kind of can't.
Yeah.
Like their best asset was probably Jaden Ivey and, not named Cade Cunningham anyway. And I mean, that ship sailed this deadline. If you wanted to do that, they just can't. They can't buy. I don't think they can buy.
Yeah. I agree. And YouTube user brought it up as well. Like Langdon is looking to get assets, and everything he's said and done has made his intention clear. I totally agree with that. Like I just highly doubt that I don't think Langdon is going to go out and make a move for Brandon Ingram that makes a ton of money, is looking for a max extension, and is basically you're just dealing for a rental. Like I don't think that we're gonna see that. Honestly, I could be very wrong, but everything that Trajan has said and the moves he's made to back it up make it pretty clear that he is not at the point where he's going to make a big splashy move. He's trying to use the cap space to garner as many assets as possible and then build everything from the ground up from there.
And on top of all of that, when you are a rebuilding team that does not have a bunch of future first round picks, like say the Rockets or the Thunder aren't rebuilding, but the Thunder have a bunch of future first round picks. Like when you're not in that situation and you look at this roster with all the holes that it has in it, wouldn't it be nice to get to dip your toe in one more time in the lottery this offseason, right?
Yeah.
In a draft that's pretty strong at the top. Like you've got Ron Holland, you've got Ausar Thompson, you got Jaden Ivey, guys that are still high potential players that are already showing that they're stepping forward and they're reaching that potential hopefully soon. Get another guy, right? One other player that hopefully is of the same ilk and is a big hit. And then maybe you're more comfortable investing in a big name, a second star to put next to Cade Cunningham. You know, then it makes a lot more sense.
Right. And even if the Pistons are like their record puts them towards the second half or towards the end of the lottery, like you can still add a guy with that. Like the Thunder went out and got Nikola Topic, who, yes, he's injured and missing this whole year, but like that could be your secondary creator, the guy that runs your second unit. Like, I mean, he could even be better than that. But there's you just need to, the thing with the draft is you just need to find one guy. And I think the Pistons have had plenty of misses, but we've only seen Langdon make a couple picks with this team. And I think taking the swing with Ron Holland says that he'll be pretty confident. And if there's a guy that he likes and he thinks fits the mold and can contribute to this team, he's gonna go out and get them. So even if the Pistons aren't in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, I think that would be okay too.
All right, let's wrap it up with this question. We did get a lot more, so that we're not going to get to today, but all of them are a little more evergreen, nothing too pressing. So fingers crossed that nothing changes over the next week. And no from Motown, ABW17, your second to question, and our mystery caller who left us a voicemail this week. We will get to it next week on the show. Apologize that we didn't get to it today with all the Jaden Ivey talk and the fallout from that. But this is topical. Since Jimmy Butler will be traded from the Miami Heat, KCP for 3 wants to know, would you trade Tobias Harris, Simone Fontecchio, and Tim Hardaway Jr. for Jimmy Butler?
I don't know. I'm kind of just like, why? Like, if you could get him for next to nothing, sure, but I just don't like. You're gonna need to attach picks, and I guess it depends on like how desperate Miami ends up getting to make this deal happen before the deadline and what the market is. But I assume like the player package of Tobias Fontecchio and Tim Hardaway Jr., like I think those are all pieces you'd be willing to give up in a trade to get a star. But I think you're going to have to give up more than that. You're going to have to give up draft picks. You're going to have to give up some sort of prospect. It just depends how close to the deadline this comes to pass. And I I know Jimmy said that he wants to play anywhere but Miami, but I don't know if this is like the right situation for him to succeed. And nearly every situation that Jimmy Butler's been in, we've seen things come to the point that they're coming to now in Miami. I don't think that would be good for this team. I think you're going to have to pay him a lot of money. So I just don't, although it's fun to think about what would happen, I just don't really see a reason it would. I think the Pistons aren't at that stage where they should take a swing. I think you'll probably see some sort of contender. I don't know where he's going to go, which is super interesting, but I think the Pistons are towards the end of the list of possibilities.
Yeah, I'm with you. It would have to cost more than Harris, Fontecchio, and Tim Hardaway Jr. Like, no shade to those guys. I think all three of them have had really good moments so far this season with the Pistons. All three of them have struggled in other ways too. But look, I mean, Jimmy Butler's still Jimmy Butler. I think if you look at his stats this season, they look like they're down. You also have to factor in that it's Jimmy Butler, and when Jimmy Butler's upset, Jimmy Butler's upset. He's making everyone sure that they know. So, like, Butler would be an awesome fit next to Cade. I think it would be a lot of fun to see those two work together. And I mean, you probably elevate pretty quickly to a play-in or playoff team, like, definitively this year, if that's something that you do. But like you said, like, that's not enough to go and get Jimmy Butler. Tobias Harris and Fontecchio and Tim Hardaway Jr., you need to add to that. That's not enough of a package. And this is still an all NBA player we're talking about. This is still an all-star that we're talking about, a guy that can, anytime you get to the playoffs, so you can put the team on his back. Not only that, but he's been there and done that. He has at points of his career been a pretty good leader for teams. I think the Pistons actually have a pretty strong locker room context right now to take in a guy that's competitive in the way that Jimmy Butler is. Like, there are only pros, I think, to Jimmy Butler, the player in Detroit. The con is that I believe he's an expiring contract or about to be an expiring contract. I know he wants a new deal.
He has a player option next year,
yeah,
like a $50+ million one.
Yeah, so he'll probably be seeking more money than that. And like you said, I mean, it's Jimmy. He's going to want to be on a contender, and the Pistons are not that. So as fun as it would be, right? Like, I am 100% on board that if you could get Jimmy Butler for peanuts and add an all NBA type player next to Cade Cunningham, while you also have guys like Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson that can learn from him and hopefully in like 3 years kind of take over the mantle from him as he starts to age out, like, absolutely do it. I don't think it's on the table. I don't think that's possible. He's going to cost a lot more than I'd be willing to pay.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, at this point, Miami just has to get the best deal possible. And I don't think the Pistons, one, could, but more importantly, two, would be willing to give it up just to bring in Jimmy Butler. So I think that is what it is. I honestly think that he might want to spite Jimmy Butler to send him to a situation that he doesn't want to go.
We are talking about Pat Riley. That is 100%. Honestly, likely. Not even just likely. That's just likely at this point.
Yeah, but even still, like, I think, like, I don't think the Pistons are. I mean, Jimmy probably doesn't want to live in Detroit during the winter. I could definitely see that, but I think the Pistons are an intriguing, like, young team that could only be a piece away. I don't think that is really, like, I don't think the Pistons would be the destination either if the Heat, their sole goal was, we're just trying to spite Jimmy Butler. I think what they're going to do is just get the most they can out of him, because you only have so many of those players that you can deal and retool or rebuild from there. And I don't think the Pistons will be willing to give up the type of package that the Heat are looking for, which I fully agree with.
Yeah, I think if you really want Jimmy Butler, right? He's 35 years old right now. So if you really want Jimmy Butler, I would focus on free agency. I would bet that he is going to decline that player option and go seeking a max contract. So if you want to be the team that gives Jimmy Butler max money until he's 38, right? You want to sign him on a 2-year deal, 2-year max contract, and have that be kind of the, the Al Horford-esque bridge superstar for this young Pistons team. I actually might be in favor of that, depending on how, the offseason shakes out and what other moves they make. I wouldn't rule it out, but I'd say that I would be much more in favor of that than trading now and giving up those assets. So if you are a fan and you do want Jimmy Butler in Detroit, hope that he declines that player option and the Pistons clear some room.
Man, I could never imagine declining. I think it's $52 million. Like, hey, if Jimmy does in fact decline that player option, he's a much stronger man than I. I know he has a lot more money than I do right now, but like, man, whoever the financial advisors are in that man's life, like, please just tell him opt into that deal, because like
I don't know. He'd probably be the best free agent out there at this point, right? Who would be better? He'd be the belle of the ball, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I just couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine doing that myself.
The only I'm with you. I wouldn't do it. The only thing that I can think of in favor of doing that, like if I were in Jimmy Butler's shoes, and we should close with this because we're totally off topic now. But if it were me and I were the agent, the only argument is that this is probably the last chance he's going to get at a max.
Yeah,
this is probably it. So if you could get a new max contract for 2 years, maybe 2 years plus a team option or something, if you want to convince the team to give it to you, right? It's more money next season than the 52, and it's money guaranteed the year after, and potentially money the year after that. He's 35. He'll be 36 starting next year. Like that would be exciting, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Or like YouTube user says here too, right? Like you could sign a $100 million contract or something just narrowly over. It's a raise and it's more guaranteed money. And, when you're 35, 36 years old, this is probably the last shot that he's going to have. Probably. He could be LeBron, right? And keep going until he's 42. But odds are not in his favor. Odds are not in his favor.
Yeah. No, I'm with that. I could see that option, but yeah, you need to have a clear understanding of the market before you do that, because declining 52 million is just like,
yeah,
wow.
you need to have feelers out, right? Like you'd need to be like, okay, the Pistons might be interested, whoever might be interested, the Bulls might want, stuff like that.
Oh man, he's probably
not
going back to Chicago either. But yeah,
hey, he is a Midwest guy, right? Well, since college, he's been in the Midwest a bunch. Minnesota, Chicago. He went to Marquette, right?
Yeah.
What's Detroit to Jimmy Butler?
That's true. That's true. We'll see. I mean, I'm not staying up for it, but that would be fun. All right, I'll close us out, Wes, unless you had any final Jimmy Butler thoughts.
I think we spent way too much on Jimmy Butler. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this, because this was not Pistons related by the
hopefully the Jimmy saga will close. I mean, it's been super entertaining, obviously, but I'm ready for it to end.
It's been fun.
As I'm sure everyone else is. But thank you everyone for joining us live, leaving questions. We did get a voicemail question that we didn't get to, but we promise we'll get to it next week. And then we have a whole bunch of stuff on trades as well as we get closer to the deadline. So apologies if we miss your question. We'll definitely get to it next week. Reminder, if you do want to leave a voicemail, you can call our phone line to ask a question, hear your voice on the show. The number for that is 313-355-2717. And special thanks to Sean Corp, the managing editor of Detroit Bad Boys, for supporting the show. And shout out to you guys again for all the great questions and talking points tonight. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.